Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty, I don't know, people like laugh at me when it comes to nutrition because I've done the same thing for about 10 years now. Like fucking chicken and rice, I crock pot chicken, bunch of chicken breasts. Breakfast is usually like eggs, and like a bagel, and then chicken and rice for two lunches, some type of red meat for dinner, usually, but same thing
Yeah,
for like
and
10
I did
years.
really similar for a long time. I have messed around with a lot of different nutrition stuff through the different sports that I've done.
Mm,
Um, like one of the wildest was when I was actually like training to fight full time for like Muay Thai and stuff like that. And I was eating like 7,000 calories a day, and I was
holy
only weighing
shit.
like, yeah, I was weighing about 183 to 185.
Good
So
Lord.
like,
Retraining
yeah,
like 5 hours a day or
yep. So I
wow.
would get up, I would coach two CrossFit classes. I would do strength training and then a CrossFit Metcon. Uh, go to work, get off of work, drive to. I was living in Pinehurst, and I drove to Fayetteville, so about an hour drive.
Mm,
And then I would usually be the first one at the gym. So I had a key, and I would unlock the gym,
mm,
and I would train from about 4 to 8 or 9 o'clock at night.
damn.
Yeah, so it was fun. I really loved it.
Yeah.
But the amount of food I was taking in was absurd. So I did that, and then when I switched over just to doing CrossFit stuff, and then just doing a little bit of Muay Thai Jiu Jitsu on the side until I didn't do any of it for a long period of time. Um, I did the zone thing. I did the paleo thing. I did the paleo
Mm,
diet with the zone diet. So I messed with all that. And, you know, I've had varying opinions of that time looking back. And I've actually come to a conclusion now. Because, like, I think my understanding of what CrossFit was trying to do with the zone diet
mm,
back then, I didn't understand it because I was thinking CrossFit Games, high performance, more is always better, blah blah blah. Like that, I got. And again, I give CrossFit a lot of grace these days compared to what I used to. I still don't give them any grace on movement stuff because their movement's trash. But because if they fix their movement, they'd have a great system. Well, fix their movement, fix the culture around programming within the different tangent. But taking somebody who is 100 pounds overweight and is going to work out, they're going to do a really scaled down version of CrossFit, and they're going to do that 3 to 5 times a week.
mm.
And then you plug them into a portion control system like a zone diet. And I
Remind
think
me, what are like the tenets of the zone diet? Because I know like
so.
the paleo thing, but yeah.
Yeah. So the zone diet, the whole it was I call it primitive macro tracking at this point.
Hmm.
Um, so the idea was, and I'm going to really paraphrase, it was a diet founded by Dr. Barry Sears, who is a kook. Like, don't get
Hmm.
me wrong. Barry Sears is insane. And I say that now because I had an opinion of him before I sat in an audience with him and listened to him speak. And then the opinion after, before I thought he was a god. And now I'm like, oh, you're a cult leader. So he is certifiably insane 100%. But the idea was is that you do a 40-30-30 split, 40% carb, 30 protein, 30 uh, fat, which to
Yeah.
us seems like, oh yeah, that just makes sense. That's an evenly balanced diet.
Yeah.
Again, you got to think 20 years ago that was absurd. If you're eating less than 70% of your diet from carbs, you're not eating a good diet. Like that's how it was in the 2000s and whatever.
Mm.
So and then what you do is you take a formula, right? And I still have this shit memorized. Um, so it was lean body mass times, uh, hey, sorry, dog's barking. Lean body mass, I think it was like lean body mass times zero point 0.7 divided by zero point 0.7 or something like that. And what it did is it spit out this number. and they called it your protein block number. And what you got
Mm.
is they divided the macro tracking into blocks. And I really think, again, looking back on it now, I give it a lot of grace because we didn't have, in 2005, you didn't have iPhones and apps, right? I think the
Mm-hmm.
first iPhone came out like '08 or '09, something like that. So you didn't have the macro tracking apps like MyFitnessPal. So what you did is you had this uh, block count.
Mm-hmm.
And for instance, mine was 18, which was high because I was really active. So I would get 18 blocks. So each block was a block of carbs was 9 grams, a block of protein was 7 grams, and a block of
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. It's all
fat
coming
was
back.
1.5, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So
Yep.
you would get 18 blocks of each in a day. And then as you got leaner, instead of increasing your block count, you increased your fat block count. So if
Right.
you would eat, it was 18. If you were an 18 block guy like I was, you would do 18 protein, 18 carb, 36 fat. And then, you would go all the way up until you get to like 5x fat. And I was at
Mm.
18 blocks at 4x fat or whatever for a period of time. Well, that worked for getting me really like anaerobically fit, but not strong. I mean,
Yeah.
I was strong compared to all the other CrossFitters that I was around because I was always kind of on the stronger end. Um, but what it did work well, and what I liked about it is that I could just go from, okay, if I'm at 18 blocks at 3x fat or 4x fat, I can drop to 16 blocks and go to 2x fat, and that starts my cut for a Muay Thai fight.
Mm. Mm-hmm.
And it was really simple. So I did that for a hot minute, and then I left that all behind after hearing Barry Sears speak, um, because I'm like, you're fucking nuts, and I want no part of this anymore. And I just did the straight paleo thing for a while, and the
Paleo.
way the timeline came out was it was about the time I was switching from competing in CrossFit to just competing in weightlifting. So
Mm.
around 2012, 2011, 2012. And the paleo thing worked really well for me. Now, did I do it exactly how a lot of people did the paleo diet, where they just ate, meat and vegetables and didn't eat fruit and
Where it's like
potatoes?
keto, basically.
Yeah, no.
Yeah.
So I didn't do that. I actually ate a lot of carbohydrates. I did a lot of sweet potato, did a lot of fruit, because I hate vegetables. Um, so
That
I did a lot of fruit, a lot of vegetables, and then and that worked really well for me for about the first 2 years of my weightlifting career. I got up to around a 270 total as a 94, and was doing okay. Um, and then the big bump that happened for me, and how I think if you're a competitive weightlifter, and I think this is going to lead us into one of the topics we spoke about before we started the podcast. I think one of the best way that I found for both performance, keeping me on weight, um, and keeping me fueled was I worked with a girl named Heidi Pladow, and always I can't remember if it's Plato. I always mess her last name up, but her name was Heidi. She tracked my macros, and it was my first experience doing like macro tracking,
hmm.
like after doing the zone diet. So I had the app. I checked in with her every week, and it worked beautifully. Like she got me because I don't cut weight. I never cut weight for weightlifting. I only did it when I was fighting, which is why I'll never do it for weightlifting.
Hmm.
Um, so I walked at 92 all the time, didn't move. There was zero weight fluctuation. Like I was 92 on the dot and was just getting leaner. Like it was, she worked some little magic with uh, her number she was giving me, but I was uh,
So you
92 and
so you recomped
yeah,
at the
and
same
just
weight, yeah.
stayed there for from like 2015 and work like did her numbers basically all the way up until like early 2018.
Hmm.
And it was beautiful, worked perfectly. Had a weird knee injury in 2018, took a break, and never really went back to working the macros with her exactly. um, but I did, once I got back from that knee tweak, I twisted it after I'd returned to jiu-jitsu. I came back and we did pretty well running the same principles as she did. And she did the macro tracking with kind of like flexible dieting, macro tracking. 2015 was when that all kind of blew up, where you would do, you would have one set of macros for regular days, you'd have a refeed day, and then you'd have a rest day.
Yeah.
And damn it, that worked really well for me. And
Yeah,
I think,
the thing with like the CrossFit diets that you mentioned, or like, yeah, what they teach is like they get really dogmatic. And like the thing with the paleo diet is there's this appeal to nature fallacy, right? Where it's like
mhm,
things that are like deemed like natural are supposedly like better in some way or superior. But there's a few issues with that. There's things in nature that can kill you, right? If you go out and eat
yeah,
them, they can kill you. And then like where do you draw the line between what is processed and what is not processed, right? So like you go out in the field and you shoot a deer, the second you cut it up and you start to like, quarter out the meat and stuff, that's processing, right? So like
yeah,
where do you draw that line? Is it like adding preservatives to the food? Is it like it starts to get kind of like jumbled, and generally like I don't believe that there's any really such thing as like bad foods inherently. If you're someone that like sits on the couch all day, you probably shouldn't be slamming sodas because like you don't want that huge like insulin spike if you're a sedentary individual. But if you're a CrossFit athlete that's training, you know, 5 hours a day, like you want those like quick acting sugar sources, right? And
yeah.
carbs are anabolic. So to me, I don't demonize any like particular food, and I'm not like super dogmatic when it comes to like prescribing the diet. A lot of it's like trying to meet people where they're at and trying to figure out like a plan that works for them.
Yeah, and I think, well, one for me, the diet thing now, I view it as a really big scope of practice deal. Like,
Hmm.
hey, outside of my scope of practice, I don't want the heat if I screw it up. So I refer out like somebody like, hey, can you help me with diet? I'm like, sure, contact these people. And I've
Hmm.
got some sources. The same way that I've got physical therapists on speed dial. I've got um, a PA to an orthopedic surgeon who's on speed
Hmm.
dial for me now, but that's just because I need a shoulder replacement. But I have people that like aches, pains, tweaks, nutrition, that type of stuff. I'm like, hey, if as soon as we butt up against outside of my scope of practice, I'm gonna refer out. So I don't get super dogmatic with the diet when I'm coaching anymore. What I will say, and I'll probably differ from you a little bit in my philosophy about food, where I do think there are foods that are inherently bad.
Hmm.
There is no justification for candy, cookies, cakes, any of that stuff. I view it the same way as there is no justification for heroin, coke, or meth. Like you put it in your body, and there's literally no benefit to you.
I would
So you're doing it
disagree. I would disagree.
solely for the pleasure, and that's fine. Now, cake isn't going to kill you as fast as Coke will, but um, neither one of them I would view as not inherently bad. I think they're both inherently bad. The flip side to it is go eat that piece of cake too, because
Mm.
there's a mental factor that comes into some of the stuff that we do. And if you aren't giving yourself the mental break, because like I'll sit here and I'll rail against cake and cookies and Chick-fil-A, but
Yeah, if you're like if you're
Chick-fil-A
so
is across the street, and chicken nuggets are good, and
yeah.
far be it from me to deny the Lord's chicken, right?
And if you're so
So
rigid with like your plan, right, that there's like no give, then people will fall off, right? If you're like, hey, this is it, you have to stick to this. People get
yeah,
like fatigue, like diet fatigue.
absolutely. And kind of what I'm saying is like, as long as you have an understanding that no, this food is not good for you, there is no inherent gain to it. As a matter of fact, it could be detrimental, but the break mentally that you'll get from consuming it and the enjoyment, because like if you're, let's put it this way, here's the line: if you go and buy a cake at the store and you come home and you eat the cake alone,
Mm.
probably got problems. It's the same as if you go and get a 6 pack of beer from the store and you drink all six alone in the dark watching old cartoons. Not
Hmm.
that I've done that, but if you're at a birthday party with your kids and you're that dude in the corner that's like, oh, I'm not going to eat the cake because it's processed, or oh, I'm not going to eat the cake because I've got something coming up, like, don't be that guy. have
Hmm.
the kids cake. You know, if it's your son's birthday, have a piece of cake with your son and know that, you know, okay, that's my break for the week. I don't
Yeah.
get to like if it's a Tuesday and you normally break on a Saturday, you don't get to have your Saturday break if you have this thing you're training for. And I think that leads into another thing. And you mentioned something interesting where you know, if you're a CrossFit athlete, there's actual CrossFit athletes, and I would say
Hmm.
there's about 100 of them on the planet. That's it. Everybody outside of that top 100, you're not a CrossFit athlete. You're a
Hmm.
weekend warrior, game time hobbyist, and that's fine. But you don't get to call yourself a CrossFit athlete because you still have to wake up and go to work and have your 9 to 5. And then there's maybe 1,000 to 10,000 of those people worldwide. And then the other 500,000 people that participate in CrossFit, you're not a CrossFit athlete. So you don't get to be like, oh, well, you know, Matt Frazier was eating 10 Snickers bars between events. That's a green light to eat Snickers. Like, no, bro, you work out an hour to an hour and a half, 5 days a week, and compete like once a weekend, you know, once a month on a weekend. Not the same. Not the same.
But I will say, like, so you're saying like essentially like demonizing like candy and sweets and stuff like that. Um, Insulin is an anabolic hormone, right? And
Oh
so
yeah. Well,
we want we
IGF-1 is an anabolic hormone. Insulin in and of itself is not anabolic. It triggers anabolic hormones like IGF, growth factors. So
okay.
there's a
It's
distinct
my
there has to be a distinction there because we're going to get in trouble.
my biochem it's a little rusty, but my understanding from a superficial level is that an insulin response will lead to anabolic processes, right? We'll signal anabolic processes.
In the right environments.
Okay.
In the right environments.
So
Right. And so there
does do sweets and like highly refined sugars not result in a insulin spike post workout?
they result in an insulin spike, but those things don't those sweets, those highly refined sweets don't exist in a vacuum.
Hmm.
Now, a lot of that stuff is a you'll be dealing with fructose, which is has extra steps to go through in order to make itself into glucose to get your insulin spike to begin to get that uh, uh, anabolic environment. And remember that insulin spike, like the carbohydrates aren't your actual building blocks. Your
Hmm.
carbohydrates are your fuel. They can trigger an anabolic environment in which protein creates
Right.
new tissue. But the carbohydrates themselves can create the anabolic environment in the right, like with the right set of triggers, which would be post workout
Hmm.
or after a fast. But it's not the carbohydrates still have to be consumed with protein. So
Right. Right.
sweets in and of themselves, which are generally just carbohydrate or sugar and fat, and generally a sugar that's not easily digested or as easily processed as a dextrose or a glucose,
Hmm.
you're not going to get the same effect as if you did a a simpler dextrose or fructose minus the fat, which slows the whole process down anyway. Because remember, fat will
Right.
slow
Right.
that spike down. So if you're eating Snickers bars anyway, which
I
Frazier
I
was the
I
goat, and he can eat a Snickers bar. But if I were doing it, I'd be like, all right, if you were just looking for the carbohydrate, your Sour Patch Kids and your gummy bears are going to do a little bit better because you don't have the fat
yeah,
mixed in with them.
that's what I'm
Um,
saying.
but you're even going to do better doing something like, hold on, show and tell, doing shit like that.
Okay. Is that that's a like carb protein?
Yeah, so it is just it's a polysaccharide from potato. It was not the one that I wanted to show, but I'm out of the one I wanted to show, which is Batargo, which is
Hmm.
a disaccharide from um, uh, barley, which is probably the fastest gastric emptying product on the market.
Hmm.
But those are the products that are going to actually create an insulin spike. And again, if you don't do it with protein,
Right.
the anabolic environment you created is no longer anabolic. which again, like it's splitting hairs, but I think it's an important hair to split when you talk about carbs and you look at them as like, well, carbs are anabolic, not standalone. They aren't.
Right.
You would be better off just eating zero carb and doing a bunch of protein if all you're looking for is anabolism, because the protein is the only thing that's actually going to create new tissue.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
But
so
like,
I think,
so for example, I've got a guy, like one guy I'm working with, he's like, oh man, I love Mountain Dew, right? He's like, that's my like
oh,
my cheat or whatever. And I'm like,
yeah,
great, okay. So you want to slam a Mountain Dew? Slam a Mountain Dew post workout, like with your protein shake. So slam your protein shake, slam your Mountain Dew. That, and you can have no guilt in doing that, right? You're getting your fast acting
I
carb
don't know about
source.
no no guilt. Um, the thought process works for me because you're refueling and you're doing the carbohydrate afterwards, and you're working to trigger the response and the release of IGF-1.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think there are way better ways to do it. Like again, we're moving way outside of my scope of practice on stuff that I generally like to give advice or guidelines on. Um, if I were working with the same individual, I'd be like, cool, you get to have a Mountain Dew a week
Mm-hmm.
until we get rid of your Mountain Dew. Because there's
Mm-hmm.
so much other shit in Mountain Dew I wouldn't want him consuming. I'm like, can we? And I used to like I've had so many ways of trying to deal with it. The best like option A and the best option was don't fucking drink Mountain Dew anymore, because that shit, like, to me, I look at most sodas as and this is me as a Diet Coke drinker on occasion, which is why I don't keep any in my house, because I will drink a I will down a 6 pack of Diet Coke in an hour.
Oh.
But I don't keep any in the apartment because I know that shit's fucking terrible for me. Um, but I'm like, okay, if zero tolerance is ideal, what's the best tolerance I can give for this dude for the amount I'm going to take him? I'm going to allow him to have it in. If he's working out 5 days a week, that's still 5 Mountain Dews a week and
Mm-hmm.
5 doses of a bunch of shit in there. And what are we counting as a Mountain Dew? Are we
Mm-hmm.
counting it as a can? Are we
Like
counting
a
it as a 20-ounce bottle? Or are we counting it the fucking 2 liter? Because I've worked with some clients that would be like, oh, I get to have a Mountain Dew, 2 liter bottoms up, and away we go. Um, you know, I would take the same guy and I would be like, hey, we're gonna mix your uh we're gonna create a orange creamsicle for you. You're gonna mix 2 scoops of vanilla protein with 2 scoops of orange Gatorade powder, and away you go.
Mm-hmm.
Which has been my exact post workout mixture for 21 years.
Yeah, that's I
It
do
hasn't
Gatorade and
actually
protein
been
mix. Yeah.
yeah hasn't actually been Gatorade. It's either been Carbolin. There was an old product called Endurox
Mm-hmm.
R4, which was 52 grams of dextrose and 12 grams of whey protein, and then I'd throw an extra scoop of protein in it, and that was mine for a long time. They got rid of that, or they changed it and they made it soy protein instead of whey protein. And I avoid soy, even though I know the science has come out that it's fine for you, but on basis, I refuse to drink soy. Don't get
Not
me
a
started.
not a soy boy.
Not a soy boy. As I sit and have my coffee with coconut milk instead of, um, but that's what I would steer that guy to. But it's hard. Nutrition's the hardest conversation to have with folks,
Yeah.
because you and I can split hairs over this all day long, and I'm probably not going to change your philosophy, and you probably won't change mine. The big deal is if that dude that's drinking the Mountain Dew after his workouts if his numbers are getting better, his body weight's going down, his fasting
Mm-hmm.
glucose is going down, his cholesterol, blood pressure, all his markers are going down, his muscle is going up, he's getting leaner, he's getting stronger. Whatever his goal is, if he's a competitive weightlifter, if his total is going up while his body weight maintains or goes down,
Mm-hmm.
fuck it, send your Mountain Dew, right? Um, and I think that's got to be the bottom line, and that's kind of where coaches need to uh you need to draw that line. There was something, uh who was I talking to? Well, story from my recent nationals trip. One of my athletes, we we went out to dinner, and we were looking for somewhere for her to eat. And I'm like, all right, what do you normally eat before you compete? You know, it's her second ever weightlifting meet, but she was a track athlete. She was
Oof.
like, oh, I want some I want some pasta. I want something with some cheese. I know it's gonna fuck my stomach up. I'm like, what do you mean you know it's gonna fuck your stomach up? Like that we shouldn't be eating that tonight. She was like, oh yeah, no, I did it before every track meet. It's um you know, I'll just suffer through it, and I'll vomit or whatever in the morning, and we'll be good to go. I'm like, you weigh in at 6 a.m. That's not how this fucking works.
Yeah.
We we went and got Italian food. Thankfully, she got something with a little bit less on the dairy side and
Yeah.
was fine. But like
Hmm.
at that point, I'm like, I can't argue her out of this because she's
Yeah.
gonna go and compete, and if she does poorly, she's gonna be like, well, if I just had my fucking pasta,
Mm-hmm.
you know. So at some point, you just have to be like, all right, if it's gonna work, we got to
Yeah.
let it work.
Yeah, and like
Um,
and with the diet, like everyone responds differently. It's just like training, right?
yeah,
Everyone's not going to respond to the same like program. So yeah, it's dude, it's fucking complicated. And like I do like I'll what I do is if athletes ask is like offer basically like macro guidelines for them, right? Like these
yeah,
are this is the kind of this is my recommendation for like macro guidelines for you. But again, like just like you said, it's really out of like getting into the super fine details of everything diet related is like out of my scope as well. So
yeah. And you, I think, I don't know what being a PT allows you in that scope, but I know from
mhm.
the CSCS side, we have the same. We both have the CSCS, and on that side, like we have very narrow
Right.
things that we can recommend before we all of a sudden get outside of like, well, you recommend something that your certification doesn't train you on, you know, and you run into that scope of
Sure.
practice thing really quickly. And again, I think that's, like you said, it's one of the best things to refer out to.
Hmm.
Because there are people in the weightlifting space that are doing it really well. Like Heidi still does it. She does it really well. You know, obviously RP. I'm not a big fan of RP personally. It's but I know RP does it, and they've had a lot of really successful athletes. In the Carolinas, actually, an athlete that works with Olga on the Butcher Barbell team, Clarity Nutrition,
Yeah.
spelled
I
like
think
with
I
her name.
follow. Yeah.
Yeah, she's done wonders with a number of different athletes. So like there are options out there that get weightlifting specific,
Hmm.
uh, and I think those are the best things to go to. You know, and I think this, you know, nutrition wasn't the goal of what I wanted to talk to you about today. Cutting weight was because I wanted to just rage against
Yeah. Well,
weight cutters for a minute.
let's
But
let's go.
um,
Let's get into that. So, all right. So we've got we've got an athlete who's our athlete's looking to, and this is a hypothetical, or it may,
yeah.
be an experience from my past, but this athlete's looking.
What's that disclaimer at the front of Law and Order? Any similarities to real incidents are purely coincidence.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, so we've got an athlete who has got a total, and they're maybe pretty significantly away from like a national qualifying total in their weight class, and they're looking down and they're like, man, if I can just maintain my strength and cut like 8 kilos or something like that, then I'll be able to hit
yeah,
these qualifying totals in the class below me, right?
yeah.
So what's your thought and recommendation on that?
Get fucking stronger where you're at. I mean, that's the short version of it.
Yeah.
It is the hardest thing in bodybuilders will tell you this. Competitive bodybuilders will tell you this. The absolute hardest thing to do is to lose fat and gain muscle, or lose fat and maintain muscle. Like that, they have an entire sport that all it is like how little body fat can I have and how much muscle can I hang on to. And they are the most miserable fucks on the face of the earth, and they're weak.
And well,
Well,
that,
compared to what we're trying to do, right?
that,
There's
there,
some that are strong, but we've got some
yeah.
assistance on that.
There's
Um,
an interesting paper that was comparing the top elite powerlifters and bodybuilders. And what they found is that
I've
like
I've seen this.
they
The
found that
numbers are
strength,
similar.
yeah, strength is directly related to muscle mass, right? So
Yep.
like
It
a lot of the top bodybuilders are actually, we generally think of bodybuilders as like just having show muscles, right? Like they're really big, but they're not actually strong.
Well,
And then
I mean,
we think of
Johnny
strengths.
Jackson, Ronnie Coleman, there were these were guys that were champion bodybuilders and champion powerlifters.
Yeah.
I know it's not calling them weak is, I know what I'm saying when I'm actually referring to that. They're not going to, if I take a in shape, 1-to-1 weight, and I take an in shape guy on the powerlifting side, and I take a bodybuilder who has now cut himself down and depleted himself,
Mm, yeah.
powerlifter wins because he's fueled. That's kind of what I'm referring to. I'm not referring to an off season or a pre-peak, pre-show bodybuilder, because obviously there are dudes that are bodybuilders that have incredible strength, but that stuff goes away as soon as you're not fueled.
Right.
That
Right.
strength disappears. So that's kind of more of what I'm saying. So I know I know what paper you're right, and you're talking about, and I agree with you that like strength and muscle mass do have a close relationship. Um, and also depending on the type of hypertrophy, if it's just sarcoplasmic hypertrophy versus, and now
Sarcomere.
I lost sarcomere.
Sarcomere. Yeah.
Uh, so like there are different forms of hypertrophy where, if
Right.
the cell itself is getting bigger or you're getting at more actual muscle cells.
Right.
So all of
Oh,
that,
ooh,
but
but does significant hyperplasia exist?
different podcast,
Different,
different
yeah,
podcast.
different
Because
topic. Because you said,
nobody's
yeah,
gonna listen once we go down that road. We
because
have
you
ended our audience if we go down that road.
because you said
Yes, I referred to.
more contractile cells, which would imply hyperplasia, where in reality we're getting more hypertrophy, right, or increase.
Well, I view hyperplasia as, or the way I was taught, the way that our curriculum looked at it when I was at school, was hyperplasia is a type of hypertrophy. So we lump it in with that. So I would.
I haven't looked at any of the like literature recently, but I remember like years ago, I think like when I was taking the CSCS, that they were saying that hyperplasia is, if it does occur, it's probably minimal. And most of like the hypertrophy that you get is just an increase in the size of existing contractile units as opposed to addition of more contractile units.
Yeah. We looked at some stuff that was fairly recent that said that you could increase contractile units depending on muscle fiber typing.
Hmm.
Um, so type 1 versus 2X, 2A, so on down the line. But podcast for another day. I want to rail on cutting because I was all rammed up for railing against people who cut weight. So three big things on it. So yes, there, like as soon as you start cutting weight, if you're an advanced weightlifter, weight cutting may be an option
Hmm.
because you've probably gotten to the top of where you're gonna hit weight wise. When I'm talking advanced, I'm talking, think Travis Cooper
Hmm.
is like, this is an example of weight cutting that I'm like, okay, I can get behind this because he dropped, when I met Travis Cooper, he competed as he was a 94 still, or even might have been close to a 105. He was
Travis Cooper was a 105.
at
Jesus
least for
Christ.
one meet, he was a big boy.
Yeah.
But you also have to remember, like, he had like 260 back squats for sets of five. Like, it was like he would do 5x5 at 260. He was as strong as you could possibly get at his weight. And I mean, he's doing powerlifting now and
Hmm.
destroying people, right? There's a reason for that. So I remember his first cut when he went to 85. Okay. So he did some meets at 94. He was a light 94 when I met him.
Hmm.
Competed at 85 when he did national stuff and world stuff. Went from 85 down to 77 and looked like a Q-tip.
Yep.
Okay. or what I thought was a Q-tip. So 85 to 77. This was before the weight class change. The
Right. That
weight
was
class
when
change
he was trying to make the Olympics for it was like 2016, right?
2016.
Is that
Yep,
when he did
2016. So
77? Yeah.
yeah. Well, one of the reasons he did 77 was because he had like a 190 some clean and jerk at 85, and the 85 that everybody was chasing at the time was Kendrick Ferris, who
Hmm.
had a 200 plus clean and jerk at 85. And Cooper looked at that and was like, I'm not going to be able to break that record right now. So he went down, and it became between Cooper and James Tatum, who were training partners, chasing after 191 on the clean and jerk at 77. James wound up going up to 85, and all of a sudden, I'm going to hold on to that. So James left the weight class to go up, and we're going to put a pin in that for a second. Travis went down, lost strength, so he went down and did lose strength.
Hmm.
He did not keep or maintain what he had at 85 when he went down to 77, but he maintained enough that he was winning.
Hmm.
All right, that's the big thing. And then when the weight classes changed, he went to 89 and then dropped to 81. When he dropped down, he didn't have the numbers from 89 at 81, but he maintained enough to win. And then when he went down to 73, which is his most recent drop, you
Hmm.
saw a massive loss on his clean and jerk, but he still did enough to win or to podium.
Hmm.
Okay. Didn't do enough to knock off Ryan Grimslin, but he did enough uh, to podium and do well. Okay. So there was this understanding that every time he cut down, he was losing some of his total. All
Hmm.
right. And at times up to 10 or 15% of his total. Like he lost a lot of his total at times. Um, but he would still win. But he was at the top of his career, had the numbers. This wasn't a matter of qualifying for a national meet. It wasn't a matter of I'm going to qualify and go compete at an F session at AO. Okay, it was the people in my weight class are 5 kilos, 10 kilos ahead of me. There's 7 dudes that are on par or ahead of me. But if I can cut down, knowing I'm going to lose 20 kilos off my total, that's still 30 kilos ahead of everybody at 77 kilos. I'm going to win. Down I go.
Hmm.
James Tatum, opposite story. James was trying to stay so light at 77 that it was affecting, especially his clean and jerk. So at 77, I don't know if he ever in a competition clean and jerked more in a national competition at 77 clean and jerked more than 170 or 175.
Hmm.
I think that was the best he ever did down at that weight. He snatched fairly heavy. He did do a competition at 77 where he snatched, I think, a 150.
Yeah.
Um,
That's
but
the
he
yeah.
would,
When you cut this, you generally it's the clean and jerk that takes a hit, right? Like the snatch you
yeah,
can maintain to a certain level, but
to
yeah.
a certain level because he didn't, his PR in training when he was still trying to hit be a 77 was 160.
Mm. Hmm.
And I remember watching that video because he was training literally 10 miles from where I live right now at Muscle Driver USA.
Hmm.
So uh, he decided to go up. And all of a sudden, and I remember one of his first meets at 80, when he went to 85, he clean and jerked like 184 or 187. So a
Hmm.
massive, like 13-kilo jump on clean and jerk competition wise, and snatched in the mid 150s. So about a 5 to 6 kilo gain on his snatch. And that was just, he didn't like excessively bulk. He just didn't cut.
Hmm.
So he left all that on the table forever. And I know that if we had each one of them on the podcast to talk about their experiences doing it, there was a lot that went into these decisions.
Right.
So I'm talking solely as an outside observer, and I'm friends with both of these guys because we lived near each other, and I still talk to them and see them at meets on occasion. But they probably have reasons, and there's more stuff behind their decisions and how they did it. And I'm kind of broad stroking it, but from an outside looking in, you saw a guy go down, lose strength, lose total to go down in order to win. You saw a guy that was staying down and wasn't able to win as effectively and decide to go up, and all of a sudden nobody can touch him at the time,
Hmm.
right? And I think if we look at that and then we now apply it to, we've got an athlete that's wants to lose, you said an absurd number, which is 8 kilos. I would say even 3 kilos would be an absurd number in order to go down because they can't make the total. Let's say they are an 89 kilo lifter and they can't make the total at 89. So like I'm gonna go down to 91. Okay.
81.
And they're or 81. You're right.
Mm-hmm.
81. I'm gonna go down to 81. And they're a lifter that's enough in between. Let's say they weigh 85.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And when we say make the total, this is simply a total of qualifying for the meet. This
Right.
isn't going to win. This isn't going to podium. This isn't going to the A session. This is I'm qualifying so I can go and lift in the D session on Saturday when the A session lifts on Sunday, or Friday when the A session lifts on Saturday. Okay. I'm going to look at that lifter and be like, as soon as you go down, not only do you stop gaining strength, you will no longer, you will more than likely not be able to maintain your current total. So you're going to go down. And if your
Mm-hmm.
total, as you are at 85, if you're like, hey, I would still have to put on, 4 kilos for my total to go qualify, but I'm 15 kilos away from the total at 89. I'm like, you're not going to have even those extra 4 kilos when you go down.
Right.
Like it's not there at all. If there's somebody that's like, I've just got the qualifying total, but I'm walking around at 85 and I can make this qualifying total in training at 85, and then we cut for the meet, I'm like, that total's not there on meet day. Because guess
Mm-hmm.
what? You've got 6 attempts and not 15 that you took to get that total in the training hall. Um, so I'm going to tell that athlete, like, how about instead of going down 4 kilos, you go up 4,
Mm-hmm.
and we make you a little bit stronger, and we make up that 15 kilo. We get you stronger, and we get you stronger in the right weight class. And we move you forward from there. One of the things, and again, that's my philosophy as a coach. I don't think until you're at James Tatum or Travis Cooper's level where you're fighting for world team and Olympic team spots, that you should be bothering with cutting at all. I think one of the dangerous things, so that's my answer to your scenario, and I'm going into another one. Um, one of the dangerous things that I'm seeing now is coaches have their junior or youth athletes attempt to maintain a weight class.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things that really fired me off. And I'm not going to name names. I'm going to try and be as vague as possible because I don't want any of the athletes, if it was their athlete's decision to do it, which it can be, but you
Mm-hmm.
as a coach have to be able to guide that athlete to a healthier decision and a better decision. So I don't want to mess with that coach or that athlete. I don't want to insult either of them. But if it were me with my athlete, and they were a junior, and they were aiming at even a teen, I'm like, you're in peak growing and puberty phase right now.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
As soon as I try to calorie restrict you, we're gonna begin to mess with some hormones. We're gonna begin to mess with, possibly some bone structure if it's a female, especially. We can run into female athlete triad, or now it's referred to as REDS, relative energy deficiency in sport. We can really run into some major health issues here. So it just, you have to have that tough conversation. Like, it just may
Mm-hmm.
not be your year for this team.
Yeah.
And let's get stronger at the right weight class.
Yeah. I think to kind of summarize, correct me if I'm wrong, but if you're an athlete that's sitting here thinking like, should I cut? Right. The questions to ask are like, A, is it your first competition? If that's the case, never cut, right? B, are you like a youth or junior athlete? In 99% of the cases, like you should not be cutting. And then C, are you going to win or podium at a major competition, right? If you're not going to, if like you said, it's just to qualify to go to nationals, then it's probably not a good idea, right? Versus if you're an experienced athlete and it's like, hey, if I make this cut and I'm able to kind of maintain, then I'm going to be gunning for silver medal or bronze medal or something. Then it's like, okay, we can have that conversation. But
Even
like aside from those things,
and like I would even say, like, I'm going to caveat those major events for me because I'm so against cutting. So against cutting. Like, major competition isn't AO series.
right,
Major
right, right.
competition is national champion.
Yeah, that's
I
what I'm
am the
saying.
best
Yeah.
in the country, not AO series, not even AO final. Like,
Hmm.
I am competing to be the best in the country as the national champion, not U25, not U23, not youth, not junior, not university. Maybe university, depending on the age and how long they've been lifting, because
Hmm.
university has gotten really competitive, and I'm here for it. But really, it would be I want to be national champion, and I have a total that far exceeds
Hmm.
what the weight class below me has.
Right.
Then I would say cut. But you better like if last year's national champion at 81 had a 330 and you're an 89 and you're thinking of going down to 81 to take that dude's medal because all of a sudden everybody at 89 has a 350,
Right.
you better have a 345 before you start going down. Like
Right.
you better have 345 in front of referees before you start going out. Like that's how against cutting I am. Like to me, I would always say go up, get
Hmm.
stronger. The whole point is of the sport is to lift as much as you can. It's not to be as light as you can to lift as much as you can. It's to lift as much weight as possible. Put the weight on the bar. Um, the the other thing that I wanted to go in with this, and we've been on this topic for a minute, and you're going to have to shut me up, is there is a health aspect here.
Hmm.
Both cutting is unhealthy, especially if
Hmm.
you're doing water cuts.
Yeah.
As somebody who has lost 12 kilos via water cut for a Muay Thai fight, I don't ever think anybody should ever water cut.
Is that
Um,
24-hour weigh-in or 2 hour?
24.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
24 and I got plugged up with an IV afterwards. So
Yeah.
this was
Yeah.
back in the good old days. Um, you know, the if you're gonna if you're gonna cut, do not do it by water. So that's one. Two, if you are unhealthy, and what I mean by unhealthy is if your blood pressure is bad, your cholesterol is bad, you have symptoms of obesity,
Hmm.
and you need to lose weight in order to not have your heart give out, which is one of the reasons why I am actively trying to lose weight because I got a little bit heavy and my blood pressure started to climb. So I am actively trying to lose weight. That's not a cut. That's trying not to fucking die. And those two things need to be separate.
Hmm.
Um, weightlifting can be a healthy way for somebody to get their exercise in and
But
you know
elite performance by definition is unhealthy.
elite again different levels of unhealthy. Unhealthy because my heart's going to give out, or unhealthy because I'm lifting weights and taking risks and things like that. Two
Hmm.
different things. All right. um if you are not elite, coming down a little bit so that my pants fit, and really that one doesn't matter, I'll buy bigger pants, but like so that my blood pressure comes down, I'm going to do that.
Hmm.
Different thought process at when I was 26, and I'm like, I don't care if my pants fit and I don't care if my blood pressure's high. uh, I am 94 kilos and I am going to chase this next 1 kilo onto my total as hard as I can. um, Different thought processes then versus now at 36. Um, but yeah, those are different things. I've got some athletes on my team or some athletes that I coach that post pregnancy trying to lose some of the baby weight, be a little bit healthier. Yeah,
Hmm.
different thought processes. But we're looking at competitive. When I look at cutting and I rail against cutting, that's people that are competitive weightlifters. I mean, I made the decision with my youth weightlifter for nationals, like, hey, we're just going to be a 96. I
Hmm.
got a phone call from him, from his mom one day, and because his mom and his parents are super supportive and really involved in his weightlifting in a good way. They're like, hey, he's 200 pounds, would be a 5 pound loss to go down to 89. She's like, should I start cutting his food back or whatever? I'm like, absolutely not. We'll just be 96.
Hmm.
And I looked at the kind of the standings, and I think it would have been a one place difference between 96 and 89, and neither of them were on the podium. So we finished sixth with a clean and jerk PR, and I'm like, yeah, that's as good as we're gonna get, and that's a massive victory for your first time ever going to nationals. So
Yeah, the thing is too that like it weightlifting becomes easier as you get heavier, right? Like
yeah,
as you gain weight, the totals do not increase proportionate to the weight gain, right? So yeah, it generally makes sense to put on some weight and build strength because you don't have to increase your total at the same rate that like your body weight increases proportionally.
yeah, 100%. Especially once on the men's side, I would say once you get over 89, everything's basically the same fucking
89
same
is
total.
89 is oh my God, it's so wildly competitive. The most competitive class. I mean,
Yeah, I
the
tell
women's 71 is like rivals it, but like the men's
women
89.
71 is nutty. Thanks, Olivia.
Yeah.
Um, well, it's not. I can't even just blame Olivia. It's Olivia. It was Kate. It was Estelle Rohr.
Dude, last year there were over 20 there was like I want to say it was like 25 or like close to 30 people in the US that posted a 300 total in the 89s.
Yeah,
Like what the fuck?
yeah.
Like this is
89.
just in the US.
I tell people all the time, like, stop being 89.
Yeah.
Just stop. Unless you're like 5'6", don't be 89.
Yeah.
If you're above 5'6" and you're a dude, you need to be. You cannot be victim weight. 89 is victim weight. You need to go up to 96.
Mhm.
And most people at 96, I'm like, go be a 102. If you're 96 and you're 6 feet tall, you need to be 102.
Yeah. There
Um,
my coach in Nashville, he's a super old school guy um from Honduras and like it was so funny to see like everyone that came into the gym gain weight. That was his his recommendation for
that's
everyone. So
that's mine.
it was so funny to see like these girls come in from like CrossFit or like something else that like had a strength background and like they had a lot of good potential, but they're like relatively new to weightlifting. And he's like, I want you to be heavier. He's like, you need to gain weight. You need to go up. And they're like, oh, I don't know. And like watching their reactions was kind of funny because that was his like go-to for everyone is get heavier.
My apologies to my athlete Madison, but I'm about to toss her right in front of the bus. But I'm going to do it because she fought me about going up because
Hmm.
she was so close to 61. And you've met Madison, right? Or seen her in person.
I don't know if I have. Maybe I have at
She's
one of
like
the meets.
5'7", five
Yeah.
six, right? And was trying to be 64, but she's like 5'6", the difficult way. Long arms, long legs,
Hmm.
medium torso. For somebody that's proportionally not built to weight for weightlifting, she's wonderful at weightlifting. And I was like, just trust me. Let's go up to let's reel this in and let's be a 71.
Hmm.
Uh, I call it the tale of two meets last year. She was underweight. Stress had a lot to do with it. So it's not her intentionally being underweight, but it's also she wasn't eating with the intention that she's eating with now. Um, so she weighed in as a 64 for a meet at in September of last year. Had a tough day. I think only went 3 for 6. She still won the meet, but she won the meet the hard way.
Hmm.
She wasn't really happy about her performance. She gained 1.5 kilos and put 12 kilos on her total a month later
Damn.
in a meet. Went to WSO, went 6 for 6, snatched 80 for the first time in competition in like 14 months, and clean and jerk 95. Um, Continuing to get up. So I think she's now about 67 and a half. Sorry, Madison, I'm putting your body weight out there. But it's a big success story. And she's like bought in now. Like she's working with
Hmm.
somebody, she's putting the weight on, she's eating, she's training with a little bit more intention. And for somebody who's in school full time to be an NP while still working full time, she's getting after it. Absolute rock star superhero. About a month ago, she did a 190 in training. So she went from like a mid 160s to like a 190 off of a 3.5 kilo gain of body
Hmm.
weight. And she's a lean lifter. She didn't gain an ounce of fat. She's a lean lifter, um, and is putting this good weight on. Just snatched, 86, and her PR clean jerk now is 106,
Hmm.
so or 105. something like that. So she's got a 191 in reserve, but the training total she did about a month ago was an 86 and a 104.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm also not a coach that hides my athletes' numbers, because if you can beat my people, come beat my people. I don't give a shit.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like this ultimate testament to like, oh, like getting bigger will make me really good at this shit. Because it wasn't just like her total that went up. Her back squat went up like 10 kilos. Her
Mm-hmm.
front squat went up. Her shoulder press went up. Her, like, she could start doing weighted pull-ups with more weight. Like, um, she could handle the volume of training better, which is always a good one. Like, I can give her more volume at heavier weight and she handles it better.
Mm-hmm.
Like all of the metrics of like, oh, the weight gain's working, proves it. And I've had a number of athletes do it. Another athlete, Corey, a male who his first meet, he was a 73. And he's an 89 now. We're probably going to wind up with him being a 96, but he's added, I don't know, 60 kilos, 50 kilos to his total in a year.
Mm-hmm.
College age athlete, 20, 22, 20, 21, 22 years old. And like, again, his ability to just handle the training load, his ability, like his squats went up, his shoulder press went up, everything went up as he got heavier. Wyatt, my youth athlete, the athlete we just had compete, he started as under 81 kilos or close to 81 kilos, and now he's going to be a 96, and he's added, I don't know, 70 kilos to his total in a year. He's also
Mm-hmm.
15, so he's got that, 16, natural testosterone running, but um, because he's middle of puberty and just fucking can train all day, all night, and all day the next day.
Mm-hmm.
I miss those young joints.
Yeah, right.
Asked me 20 years ago, what's arthritis? Ask me now, what's it like without arthritis?
Yeah.
So like, your coach was onto something. Put the weight on and be stronger.
Mm-hmm.
So, but yeah,
Yeah.
so that's my,
So I guess that answers that question. Don't cut weight.
yeah, don't cut weight. But I'm sorry, man, I had to rail against that one real hard.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think we're on the same page, and I think most coaches like
Well,
agree with that.
I'm waiting for you to come up and play in the 96s.
Hey, man, I've had some life stuff go on the past eight months, so I've leaned out quite a bit, but starting now, I'm back on that bulk. I'm gonna be back on
There
the
we
slow
go.
bulk. So I was
How,
like I was 190 this morning,
I
so like
remember that.
super lean, super
Yeah.
lean.
How's that knee doing?
Knee's great.
Yeah.
Knee's fantastic. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Dude, wild. I don't think we talked about this the last time. I was
Mm-mm.
rolling around with the high school guys because I moved back to Indiana in December. So I was going into the wrestling room and rolling around with the high school guys. And this one guy had a single leg and I was fighting it off and he like rolled and twisted and it just popped. Like I felt a pop and I was like, dude, did you hear that? And he's like, what? And I was like, I don't know. That was really weird. And so I jumped up, like I was moving around on it. I was like, I think it's okay. I think I have no idea what happened. There's like this weird tingling, like loose sensation on my medial knee. But I was like moving around. I was like, I'm okay. I think I just like strained like the MCL or something. And then it freaking blew up and it was so painful. And I had positive
Oh.
like pivot shift, right? Like if I'd let my knee go into
Mm.
valgus or twists, it just felt like there's nothing there. And so I got the x-rays, no like, bone damage or anything like that, but insurance wasn't going to cover the MRI. So I never definitively confirmed that it was like an ACL rupture, but based on like mechanism of injury, based on like the symptoms afterwards, like I think it is highly likely that there was at least some ACL involvement. But dude, 6 weeks later, I jerked 170 off the blocks.
Yeah, I saw
So
that, you jackass.
yeah, I was like, you know what? I'm just gonna like give it some time, see what happens, because ACLs can heal spontaneously, even fully ruptured ACLs in a
Yeah,
small portion of individuals. So,
you're not the first individual I've seen have, uh, again, unconfirmed, but most likely an ACL rupture, um, and forego the surgery and return to sport.
Hmm.
Um, I know I've seen at least one other person do it in weightlifting. Um, they wound up switching over to power jerks, and that did better for them.
Hmm.
Um, because they actually had mechanism of injury for them was a split jerk.
Yeah.
Um,
I had what
and
one of the girls I worked with tore her ACL on a split jerk, right? And when she worked back in, like I came in like later stages of rehab, like return to sport and like working her back into weightlifting. And she was terrified to split jerk. She's like, I don't want to split jerk. So I was like, okay, I guess we're
power
power
jerk.
jerking. And she was like never great with it. And it was always kind of like shaky and off. And she's like, can I try squat jerk? And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. Like at this point, might as well try. And day one, she's squat jerked like 90% of her best split jerk
Yeah.
ever. So we're like, all right, I guess you're a squat jerker.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I rail against the squat jerk really hard simply because I hate communists and communists use the squat jerk. Um, but in all serious,
Kendrick Ferris, squat jerker.
Kendrick Ferris doesn't know what jerk he's doing until the bar leaves his shoulder.
Fair.
I love watching him talk about jerks. He's like, listen, I don't know what's going to happen once the bar leaves the shoulder. I'm going to lock it out. We're just going to figure it out from there.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, like uh, Tom Soroka had a great view, and this is the view I've commonly held about the squat jerk: is that a squat jerk is just a lazy power jerk. So when I have people switch over to the power jerk, I try to get them as close to the parallel as
Mm,
I can get, so that they can still find the depth that they can get out of a split jerk. Because if you have somebody, Greg Everett posted the video the other day, shifting gears about uh, strength based or strength style jerks versus
right.
explosive or
Like
quick jerks.
elastic. Yeah.
Yeah, elastic style jerks. I think if you're a really good elastic style jerker, you'll be really good with a power jerk. And I think that if you have to switch over to a power jerk, but I
Mm,
think if you're a strength style jerker, you're going to have a harder time with the power jerk and need that extra room going into the squat if you can't split.
mm.
Um, so, or at least getting a little bit lower. And I think this is would be something like, if we look at the Chinese team, like a Shizi Yang versus a Li Dayan,
Or
right?
like a
Li Dayan,
or yeah, or like a loo that like bottoms out like
yeah,
the
Blue
yeah,
bottoms out, but like even she is more of a strength jerker, right?
right.
Because you can see the strain and the strength on him. Where if you look at Lee, it's very sharp, very short, very fast, with his dip driving down. Um,
I
and
think
again, I hate
Apti was a great example, right? Apti
Apti's
had
a phenomenal
the
example.
most beautiful. And would you consider that a squat or a power jerk? Because
I would consider it a power jerk because he was
he was
above
above. Yeah,
parallel,
yeah,
and I actually view exactly what he did. I wouldn't even call it a power jerk. I view his jerk as a push jerk. It's non
yeah, yeah, yeah.
foot movement jerk, and I refer
Right.
to that as a push jerk.
Yep.
Um, and I think that's another great example of that. And I had a guy I coached in Colorado who was just struggling. Like we couldn't get him a good split for like 8 months, and I'm like, we're gonna try a power jerk. Couldn't get the foot movement of the power jerk. Okay, we're gonna push jerk, and kind of turned it into an apty jerk, and it worked well for
Hmm.
him because he had the upper thoracic strength to be able to do it. Um, but yeah, I think when we look at these jerk styles and when we are moving somebody away from a split jerk for whatever reason, moving them to a power jerk and then accepting, again, going back to Tom's quote that a squat jerk is just a failed power jerk. Um, if you have to squat the weight up, uh, you know, descend and come up the way that you need to. But if we can get you to stop that thing above parallel, the higher we stop the bar, the
Hmm.
smaller the room for error is as
Right.
you come up. Um, or excuse me, the greater the room for error
The
is.
larger the
Yeah, larger
margin.
room for error.
Yeah.
Sorry. Larger the margin of error is as you come back up, and the lower you have to go into that squat, the smaller the margin of error gets.
Yeah.
Um,
And
and
the other piece of it is like you got to be strong as fuck, right? Because
oh
like
yeah,
if that's a maximal clean for you, right? And then you got to squat it again, you're gonna go all the way down in that squat and have to overhead squat it. Like which is why the Chinese get away with it because they're brutally strong in the squats. And like
Yeah.
that's never a limiting factor. But that's something you have to consider too, is like if
And
it's
even
if it's going to be a maximal clean, like you're
The
gonna have to
Chinese
squat
have
that
moved
again.
away from it for most of their athletes.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the Chinese athletes, the next generation of Chinese lifters coming up have actually started to split jerk a lot more.
Hmm.
And even everybody after Lu Xiaojun began to power jerk instead of full squat.
Hmm.
She would ride that line a little bit, but Li Dayin has never squat jerked. He's always been a power jerker. You
Hmm.
know, Tian Tao, when Tian would broke the record, he power jerked it. He didn't sit all the way down on it. And what improved his jerk consistently for Heart Attack Tao was when he began to power jerk and catch them and receive the bar catch, lock the bar out, fixate the bar, whatever, a little bit higher.
Hmm.
I think that is you're starting to see a change in philosophy there from some of the Chinese national coaches that
Hmm.
okay, maybe the margin of error is too small with a full squat, and maybe they don't always have the legs for it.
Yeah.
So, but
They're starting to lose their luster, man. The Chinese team. They were so
I'm okay
untouchable.
with it.
Yeah, they were
I'm
so
okay with it. Screw them.
untouchable for so long, and now it's
I
like,
want I want Hampton Morris to fucking win so hard. Oh,
yeah.
I want that. I want this so bad.
Well,
Uh,
I would have loved to see Olivia go head to head with what's her name? The
I
71.
I don't even know her name, but I
She would even like if she was in great shape, because obviously she wasn't in fantastic shape at the World Cup and Olivia beat her outright, but
yeah.
she still has the higher total. So I would love to see, because Olivia, she keeps climbing, right? And
She
so
just did
like
that 120,
121,
151,
yeah. So like I would
which
love to
means
see
that
her go head to head.
I've got to do 121, 152 this year.
Yeah,
Because
exactly.
I'll be damned if these little girls are gonna lift more than me. I say that and I'm like, you know what? I really hope she does like a 155 at the Olympics.
Dude,
Like if she
she's good for it. 155 for sure. Yeah.
the one she's doing these clean and jerks without a fucking belt on, and that just makes me angry in my
Well,
soul.
she belts now.
She does.
Didn't she wear a belt for that? I'm pretty sure she wore a belt for the
Oh yeah, I
15.
think she did wear a belt for that one.
Yeah,
Um,
everyone was shook when she wore the belt for the first time. Like I think it
yeah.
was like last year.
Um, but she is. I like her attitude. I have not gotten to meet her in person.
She's got a
I like
belt.
her attitude. I like it. Does she now?
Yeah.
Nice. I like her attitude. I like how she presents herself. She's a really fun lifter to watch. She always has a smile on. I really dig
Hmm.
that. Don't get me wrong. I love the dudes that are like me that are just cage gorillas that want to come out and destroy things. And uh, those are some of my favorites. Like Phil's aggression. His retirement hit me really hard. His
Hmm.
aggression on the platform was one of my favorite things ever. Like he was just a savage, and I loved it. It
Yeah.
was one of my favorite things watching him. And there have been a bunch of other weightlifters that I really like, but I also like her, like Olivia, Kate, that just they'll hit this world shattering snatch or world shattering clean and jerk and just smile and just
Yeah.
skip off the platform. And I'm like, one, fuck you and your young joints, but two, it's just awesome. I think that's you
Yeah.
need both sides of that sport to motivate both sides of the people that are going to attract it, and I think that's a really cool role model
Yeah.
for
I was
younger lifters.
talking with someone else recently. I think it was on here actually. Where like John North was posted something recently, which like John, okay, well, hold your opinions. But he was saying like, like to be good in this sport, he was like telling his story, which he's got an incredible story and like very inspirational. It helped grow the sport a lot. But he's like, I was living in a car, training 6 days a week for 5 hours a day. And like, if you're not willing to do that, like, you're not going to be successful in this sport. And like, more is better, blah, 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 blah. And it's diametrically opposed to Olivia Reeves, who trains 4 times a week, eats like salads, and like, she's a student and she's our best weightlifter in the US. Right. So it just shows
Well,
you that there's different styles and like success is going to look
I
different for different people.
I won't speak on John. I have my opinions. There are people that know him and know his story better, and they can speak on it. So I don't want to stir any pots there. Um, I just wasn't a fan of him. I'm not. I'm not now. And I've never said that publicly, so I don't know if we need to clip that out of the podcast before it goes up. Um, but what I'll say is, there are a lot of different sides to the sport, and I think one of the things that people like Olivia, like CJ Cummings, who, CJ had famously trained, 3 days a week for a good period of time,
Hmm.
uh, and had a great attitude and was always smiled and soft spoken and was really good. Uh, what they do for the sport is they bring in a lot of the people that look at strength sports and only see dudes like me covered in
Hmm.
tattoos that yell and scream a lot. They need to see another side of the strength sport,
For sure.
um, in order to get an interest and be involved in it. I don't think we need to go back to the days 15 years ago where weightlifting meets were like golf tournaments,
Hmm.
because I hated those. I hated lifting in silence, and I hated that nobody cheered. They all just did little
Hmm.
golf clap. I love that they cheer and they get amped, and that we actually have a meet environment now. Um, but there are definitely people that would avoid the sport because of the intimidation factor. And
Right.
I think people like Olivia, like you and I can look at Olivia and we know she lifts. Like we can
Hmm.
see the build, we can see the strong back, we can see the strong legs. Um, but most people walking by her on the street would not be aware that she would
Hmm.
lift their car over her head.
Hmm.
Um, and I think the sport needs that too.
Yeah.
Uh, so I think what she brings to the sport, what Kate brought to the sport, what even Maddie brought to the sport, with again somebody that when Maddie was in the lighter weight classes, especially, didn't look like she was a weightlifter, but
Hmm.
was one. She did what her run of meets back in whatever it was, 2015 or 2016, where she had like 30 attempts in national meets and international meets without a single miss, something like that, between the
Hmm.
consistency. You remember that?
I no, I didn't. Wasn't aware of that. That's crazy.
Yeah, you'll need to look it up, but she did like a bunch of meets in a row without missing a single lift. Like she just kept
Hmm.
going 6 for 6, 6 for 6, 6 for 6, 6 for 6. Like at
So this
national.
this brings up a good point. Before I forget, I wanted to ask you because you were talking the last time you were on here. You were talking about some of your athletes and like misses in competitions and stuff like
Mm,
that. So are you one of the guys that all your athletes should go 6 for 6 every competition, or like
the
what are your thoughts on that?
goal is always 6 for 6,
Right,
because
it's
six for
always the
six is
goal.
really, yeah,
Right,
6 for 6 is really hard to beat.
right.
Um, and one of the things I really believe in is momentum,
Mm,
building momentum from the first lift through the end of the meet. That was my style. The majority of meets that I've done, I didn't miss a snatch.
mm-hmm,
And generally, if I missed a snatch, that means clean and jerk's going to be a shit show.
mm-hmm,
So most of my meets, especially 2015, 2016, 2017, 2018, I would go 3 for 3 on snatch. Most, not all. I don't.
mm-hmm,
That's not all of them, but most of them. And then I would typically have a decent clean and jerk day, and usually go 2 for 3 on clean and jerk. Typically because I would make my first two and then take like a 15 kilo jump for my third for no fucking
mm-hmm,
reason. But the way that I plan out openers and second attempts and third attempts for athletes is typically you're going to open with a weight that you'll always hit. Like
mm-hmm,
my opinion is you should never miss an opener. If you missed an opener, something went wrong. So we should always make our opener. Second attempt we should always make. It should be between 97 and 101% of your PR. That's not a hard and fast law. I'll look at somebody, see how they're lifting, and be like, okay, what can you hit today?
mm-hmm,
But we want to make those first two. And then the third attempt is generally a PR attempt, either a meet PR or a lifetime PR, but some sort of a PR attempt is what we're doing, number three. There are sometimes I'll change that,
mm-hmm.
but uh, for the most part, that's kind of what we're doing. I think athletes, especially beginner athletes, should go 6 for 6. Like,
Right.
if you're new to the sport, your first 10 meets should be 6 for 6 meets.
Yeah.
Like, you should always be aiming to hit 6 for 6. Even when you're trying to win, I have a different competition strategy for each athlete if we're trying to actually win and beat somebody, like if they're chasing somebody down.
Mm-hmm.
Because typically I'm not even looking at anybody else in the field.
Mm-hmm.
My athletes haven't been, we're just now getting to the point where it's like I've got to pay attention to some other people and play some games and do some of that. Usually they're just trying to get to the next level, and
Mm-hmm.
we do a good job of that. So if all they're trying to do is qualify, we lay out a 6 for 6 plan and we get them qualified on the second and we PR them on the third. So when I actually have to have them compete against an individual or compete to win, I still look at it like I'm just going to have my athlete make 6 lifts and I'm going to count on you to miss
Mm-hmm.
because you're more likely to miss than one of my athletes.
Mm-hmm.
My athletes are super consistent, and that's how I feel. And if all I got to do, it's an easier job to call my attempts in a way to make somebody else miss than it is for me to put pressure and have to gamble, right?
Right.
Like if you take Madison, for instance, if I have her go 3 for 3 in snatch and I just call the attempts just right and time my changes just right, I'm going to put a little bit of pressure on somebody else that, like, okay, she went 3 for 3 and you have to make your second and your third to beat her. You're
Mm-hmm.
more likely to miss in order to have to beat her than we are, okay, you have to make this to win. So that's kind of my strategies. Like,
Yeah.
get the 6 for 6 and put the pressure on everybody else.
Yeah. Every coach has like a different approach. I've known people in the past that are like, you should always go 6 for 6 and make all your lifts at like every competition. And then same guy in Nashville that I was talking about earlier, um, he would always open at the heaviest weight that you had hit in the previous cycle. So like pretty much all his lifters would go 2 for 6 like every competition or bomb. So like you maybe hit your openers and then after that it's like going for a PR or something, right? And so it's like this incredibly aggressive approach. And for me, it's like honestly, if you're going, with an experienced lifter, if you're going like 5 for 6, or like 4 for 6, then that tells me that hey, we're pushing, we're trying to hit like big weights, or maybe gunning for our competition. So it always depends on the situation, but I guess I'm on neither side of the spectrum where it's like we should always go for 6 for 6, or we should just be so absolutely aggressive with our attempts.
Yeah, what like hard and fast. I don't say we should always go 6 for 6 because then that means every meet that you don't go 6 for 6 is a failure. And
Right.
I don't ever want to frame anything for any of my athletes as you failed. Even a bomb out, I don't like it for my athlete to go home and be like you failed. If you bombed out, that should mean that either you're sick, you're injured, or we went after something as a last chance to do something else. For
Hmm.
instance, I had an athlete bomb at States last year. It was my only athlete that bombed at States, and she felt really bad, and I felt really bad, and I probably took it way worse than her. Like, if my
Hmm.
athletes do bad at a meet, I'm gonna go home and I'm gonna cry in the shower.
Yeah.
Like,
That's
one of my
my toxic trait as a coach is if you do well, it's all on you. And if you do poorly, it's all on me, right? Like I'll take like
bro,
full responsibility.
you are not the only one.
Yeah.
Holy shit, am I the same way?
Hmm.
And like every coach that I've ever met probably feels that's a good coach probably feels the same way. I try to take no credit for when my athletes do well, and if they do something wrong, even if they're like, "Oh, that was my fault" or whatever, and they release me of responsibility, I'm going to go home and I'm going to cry in the shower and drink.
Hmm.
Not that alcohol is a solution to all problems, but was the solution to that one. Jokes, kids, these are jokes. Alcohol is bad. But you know, it was a tough situation, and she bounced back, and we did an online qualifier, got her qualified up, and she went and did finals and did phenomenal and had a great day at finals. But it was, you know, it, if I make 6 for 6 the law, then anytime somebody goes 5 for 6, they miss one lift, they're going to be like, oh, I disappointed coach. Or they go 2 for 6 and they had to eke out a total with every fiber of their being because something was just off that day. And they're like, well, coach, I failed. I'm like, no, you did amazing because you felt like shit. You didn't sleep for the past week. Your kid was up crying. You've got, the bubonic plague or whatever, and you still showed up and you lifted and you totaled and you put yourself out there. Like, that's still a win. So,
Yeah.
what I try to do is get every athlete at least their 4 for 6, get them their first and their second, and then let them take a risk. And then when we go 6 for 6 and do that type of stuff, I try to make sure that any risk we are taking on those third attempts is calculated enough that they're going to hit it.
Right.
Like, I never get so wild, because I've seen some athletes, I've been the athlete that has just put a weight on the bar and been like, the chance of me making this is about 10%, but if I
But fuck
make it,
it.
it's going to be wild.
Yeah.
I mean, I went from 161, which was a post-surgery PR after my fourth shoulder operation. It was 20 months after my shoulder operation, something like that. Put 161 on the bar, made it, and it was a second attempt, and I put 174 on because that's what I would have needed to qualify for nationals.
Damn.
It was the most beautiful deadlift you've ever seen. It was such a pretty deadlift. It was such a beautiful deadlift. There was no attempt to even make it a pull. I stood up with it.
You're like,
it was just,
damn.
Damn. And I just dropped it because I had won the meet at that point.
Yeah.
But yeah,
that's an interesting thing that you see at these international competitions is what is the success rate for world record attempts when someone has already won the competition?
Yeah.
I don't know of any. I don't know of
I
any
have
world
not.
record attempts that have been made after the person has already secured gold in the competition.
Lasha.
Oh, okay, fair enough. But it's
liar.
It's extremely low though, right? Because like
Yeah.
there's like everyone at that level is a freaking competitor, right? And it's like, oh, you hit, 175 or whatever. I gotta hit 176. Like, I'm gonna make it happen. Versus if you secured the win, you don't have that like that drive to like still to hit that weight.
Did Piro break a clean jerk that way? Did he win and then
Did
come
he?
out for like a 215 or something like that?
I don't know.
I'd
I'm
have to
just
look it up.
thinking in like the recent era, like,
But it's rare. I mean,
yeah,
even back then it was rare. But it's definitely rare. I would say probably the only person has been Lasha, because like he just wins on his openers, and then
right,
he's like,
right, yeah,
I'm just here to cement my legacy.
yeah.
Um, he's just here to give us 225, 175.
Also, you mentioned the online qualifier, so I had an interesting discussion with another coach about this,
Mm-hmm.
where he's like, "These are kind of bullshit, and we should get rid of them." What are your thoughts on the online qualifiers?
I love them. I
Yeah,
love the online qualifier. I think it's great. Um, I don't know why he thinks they're bullshit. I think it
because
was one of the great.
I mean, it comes down to like it's not really a competition, right? Like you don't have judges in front of you. You get as many attempts as you want. Honestly, like within the
Yeah,
5 hours or whatever it is, like you could take as many attempts as you want. So it kind of you lose the spirit of like competition, I guess, and like the nerves
you're
that come
seeing.
from like competing
Yeah,
against people and being on the platform.
you're seeing fewer and fewer people take advantage of them. You're not
Yeah.
seeing participation rates go up. I see his point. I would not view the. I call it an online qualifier. I don't call it an online competition. So I do
Mm-hmm.
draw that distinction. Originally, I was super against it because it was one of those things that was born of the COVID era, and I hate everything
Right.
that ever happened with the COVID era because it was the COVID era, and the whole world just went stupid for a minute. Um, so I really hate that. But having had athletes use the online qualifier, like the way that I've had athletes use it is Olga was one of the individuals that used it to qualify for a meet last year,
Mm-hmm.
and she had spent, she had a lot of weightlifting experience, many meets, Took a year off to do powerlifting, or a year and a half off to do powerlifting, did her powerlifting thing, didn't have a meet. She had the total, and she had qualifying total from before the qualifying period for AO finals.
Mm-hmm.
Just need to throw a total up to be able to qualify to go to AO finals. The
Right.
online qualifier works for somebody who's done that. I think that's a good thing. I think the online qualifier is also a really good thing for people that live in super remote areas that don't get a lot of
Mm-hmm.
weightlifting exposure. I'm sorry, there's not a ton of gyms in North Dakota.
Mm-hmm.
So being able to have the online qualifier available for somebody that's like, hey, I just need this total to be able to line up my trip to AO series or AO finals or whatever. I think they are really, really good for that.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm calling it a qualifier, not a competition. I do think that USAW should stop sending medals out for it, because it's just a qualifier.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I hope that it sticks around, because it's going to increase participation at the bigger meets, which is what we've always wanted.
Mm-hmm.
We've always wanted more participation at these national events. You know, I remember the national championships that was done in a fucking roller rink. I remember watching that. Okay. So increasing participation at national events through usage of the online qualifier, I think, is something that is really good, because I
Mm-hmm.
never want to see us do a national championship inside of a 1980s roller rink ever again. Um, but I would also agree with the coach that no, it's not a competition. You do get a lot of leeway. You're lifting in your gym, on your bar, and with your environment, and your friends cheering you on. Um, I'll say that I've had maybe 5 or 6 athletes use it. I've rarely had any athlete do better in an online qualifier than they would have done in a competition.
Mm-hmm.
But most of my athletes are insane like me, so they dig on the show and the competition and being around their friends, and
Yeah.
you know, so I can see that. I hope they stay around. I hope they stay around forever.
Mm-hmm.
I'll say that there are refs on that online qualifier that are way worse than any of the refs I've seen at any national meet, because they can
Like more
stop.
more strict.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was
yeah.
curious about how that works because I had a girl do the same thing. We used the online qualifier to qualify for finals, and like man, her one elbow, it was so close. We actually repeated the weight. I had her do it again, and she hit it again, and it was like the same thing. That the one elbow was so close, and I'm like, man, I really don't know. Like, do they just pull up the video, watch it, and then like give it
They can
wider,
replay it. They
slow it
can
down?
fast forward, slow it
Okay,
down,
okay,
and that's the thing that pisses me off.
yeah.
And that's again why I call it a qualifier and not a competition.
So it's like a
Uh,
it's like a jury essentially. It's like every
it's
every lift
based,
is
yeah,
like a jury call. Yeah,
yeah.
interesting.
Um, and they are tough.
Hmm.
They are real tough, and I think, um, you know, I'm torn on, do I want them to be really tough for the online qualifier, because they're doing it in an easier environment. They're not
Right.
doing it in a actual competition. Do I want them to be tougher so that, there is a balance to it?
Hmm.
Because we've all been to the local meets where when the heaviest lifter comes out, when the strongest lifter of the meet comes out, he just doesn't get reds,
Yeah.
right?
Right. Right.
I've
Right.
been to a lot of local meets where like there was some elbow wiggle, but you know, or there was a legitimate reband, or there was a legitimate press out, and I'm like, they need to take that from him, but it's because he's lifting 20 kilos more than the next closest guy,
And
whites across the board.
international
Yeah,
meets
same.
even. You see the same thing. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
same thing. So, um, I think I think that's the balance, is that because the refing can be so much stricter for these online things.
mhm,
Again, I think keep them around, increase participation.
mhm. Well,
So
cool, man. I gotta run here. I actually have a haircut I gotta run over to, but it's been fun as always. Any
this
last
was a
closing remarks or anything?
Uh, no, I'll do the whole little self plug. Just find me Butcher Barbell on the gram, and Coach Mongo Smash on the gram. Um, and anybody that's interested in doing their USAW level 1, we've got 3 coming up. So hit me up and check it out on the gram. So I'm going to do the shameless plug there at the end.
Nice.
Um, Other than that, I love doing these, man. I really hope we get to do another one. This one was
For
fun because
sure.
you and I will actually go after it with each other.
Yeah.
um,
We'll push back a little
so
bit. Yeah.
I
Yeah.
love it.
Yeah.
It's an absolute blast, and I really hope to get to do it again.
Awesome, man. Well, thank you.